You never really know how fragile your life is until it all starts to fall apart. You wake up thinking everything's fine, thinking you're in control of your own story, and then one moment changes everything. It all unravels. That's where my story begins. My name is Jake Monroe, and I had the perfect life. Well, I thought I did. I'm 28, work as a lawyer, own a house in the suburbs of Atlanta, and have a wife who I thought was the love of my life. I thought I knew everything about myself, about my family. But then I found a box. I found a box in the attic one rainy Saturday. I've been going through old things, cleaning up some of the junk that had been collecting dust for years. I wasn't expecting anything important. Just the usual old Christmas decorations, family photos, the kind of stuff you just throw away when it's time to clear out space. But buried beneath a pile of magazines, I found a box. It was small, unremarkable, the kind you'd think nothing of at first glance. But the moment I opened it, I knew something was wrong. Inside the box were old letters, handwritten, dated back years. I thought they were from family friends, maybe old correspondence from my parents' past, but what I found inside changed everything. These letters were not addressed to me, but to someone named Sophie Monroe, my biological mother. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I've always known I was adopted, but I'd never heard the name Sophie Monroe before. As I read through the letters, my heart began to race. The truth hit me like a freight train. These letters revealed the deepest family secrets, secrets that had been hidden from me for years. My biological mother wasn't just some innocent woman who gave me up for adoption. She had been part of a criminal network, someone who had been betrayed by my adoptive mother. The betrayal was more than just personal. It was about survival, manipulation, and the destruction of my real family. You see, I'd always thought that my mother had died during childbirth, but these letters told a different story. My adoptive mother had sold my biological family out to the authorities. She had set them up, leading to their arrest and death. And I'd spent my entire life thinking everything was fine, living under the lie that my real family didn't exist, that I was better off with the family I had now. But the truth? The truth was a sick, twisted mess. My adoptive mother, the one I'd loved and trusted, had betrayed my biological parents for her own selfish reasons. She had played the role of the perfect mother for years, but behind it all, she had blood on her hands. And I was living a lie. I felt dizzy as I continued to read. With each letter, I learned more, how my mother had been forced to choose between her child and the only family she had ever known, and how she had made the ultimate betrayal to save herself. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how my adoptive mother had twisted everything. She painted herself as a savior, as the one who had given me a better life, when all along she had destroyed the very family I should have had. My biological mother had been forced to disappear, leaving me to be raised by a woman who didn't deserve my trust, let alone my love. The rage started to build. My chest felt tight, my fists clenched. The lies, the manipulation, it had all been in front of me, and I had been too blind to see it. For years, I trusted my adoptive mother. I believed everything she told me. But now, I couldn't look at her the same way again. How could I? I spent the next few hours looking through every piece of evidence I could find. Each document, each photo, each story was a revelation. My biological parents had been well-known figures in the criminal underworld, people who were feared and respected. And my adoptive mother had destroyed them to protect herself, to keep her new life intact. I needed answers. I needed to know how far this went. Who else had been involved? How deep did the betrayal run? I started digging further into my adoptive mother's past. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. She wasn't just an innocent bystander in this crime. She had been the mastermind behind it all. The life I thought was mine, the life I thought was real, was based on lies. I had been raised by someone who had no problem selling out my biological family just to secure her own position. The rage didn't stop building. I was furious. I felt sick. This wasn't just a betrayal of my family. It was a betrayal of me. I had been lied to, manipulated, and used. My whole life had been a fiction, a story that someone else had written for me. And now I was supposed to sit back and accept it? I couldn't. I wouldn't. I knew that I had to confront my adoptive mother. I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't let her live this lie any longer. But at the same time, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about uncovering the truth. The full truth. I needed to know what she had been hiding. I needed to make sure I wasn't still living in her shadow. But I also knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I had to confront her. I had to force her to face the consequences of her actions. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew I had to. And when I did, she would see that I wasn't the naive, trusting son she had raised anymore. I wasn't going to stand by while she manipulated me. I wasn't going to let her destroy the legacy of my biological family without making her pay. I stared at the letters for a long time, the words swirling in my head. There was no turning back. The truth was out, and it wasn't going anywhere. Neither was I. The anger inside me didn't subside after finding the letters. It only grew, festering like an infection that I couldn't stop. The more I thought about what I had learned, the more I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. My mother, my real mother, had been a part of something so much bigger than I could have ever imagined. She wasn't some innocent woman who gave me up. She was a woman who had been forced to betray her own blood for her survival. And then there was my adoptive mother, the woman who had raised me, the one I had trusted above all others, the one who had built our life together with me, brick by brick, only for it to be all based on lies. Lies that were buried so deep in the past, I couldn't see them. Lies that had ripped apart not only my family, but also my entire identity. I couldn't just let this go. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to find out everything about my biological parents, everything about how my adoptive mother had betrayed them and me. I needed to know why. Why had she made the choice she did? And why had she hidden it from me for so long? I couldn't stop now. I was already too deep in. The anger kept me awake at night, my thoughts spinning around the same question. Why? Why did my mother sell my biological family out? Why didn't she tell me the truth? The next day, I began my search. I started digging through the police reports I had found in the attic, the ones that detailed my biological mother's arrest and her connection to a criminal organization. It was like opening a door to a world I had never known existed. My biological mother's name, Sophie Monroe, had been linked to a string of violent crimes in the city. She had been a part of a syndicate, a criminal family that controlled the underground world. And the worst part? She had betrayed her own family to the police in exchange for her own safety. She'd sealed their fates, and in doing so, she had sealed mine as well. I didn't know how to process it. The woman who had given birth to me wasn't a victim. She was a criminal, and I was the product of that world, a world built on betrayal, greed, and violence. I couldn't understand it. How could my biological mother do that? How could she give up her own flesh and blood for the sake of survival? How could she let her own family pay the price for her actions? I needed to know more. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. So I started reaching out to people who might know more about Sophie Monroe, people who had worked with her, people who had known the real story. The first person I contacted was an old associate of my biological father. His name was Richard Davis, and he had been a close friend of my father's before everything went wrong. I found his number through some old connections, and after a brief conversation, he agreed to meet me. He was reluctant at first, but when I mentioned my name and the truth I had uncovered, he knew who I was. When I walked into the diner to meet Richard, I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect him to look like he had seen a ghost. His eyes were wide with shock when I introduced myself, but he didn't hesitate. He knew exactly who I was and what I was there for. "I'm sorry, kid," Richard said, his voice rough. "Your mother, Sophie, she made a choice she had to make to survive. But the truth is, it wasn't just about her. It was about your father, too. You have to understand that. There was no way out for them. No good ending. And in the end, they both paid the price for the life they chose." He leaned back in his seat, his face hardening. "I don't know what you're after, but you need to understand something. Your parents weren't good people, kid. Not like you think they were. They were tangled up in things that were bigger than all of us. And your mother, she made a choice. A bad one, but she made it." I was silent for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in. The idea that my parents weren't innocent victims hit me like a brick. They were criminals, living in a world of violence and danger, and I was their product. I wasn't some victim of circumstance. I was a byproduct of a world I had never known. I'm not looking for excuses, I said, my voice steady. I'm looking for the truth. What happened to them? Why did my mother betray them? Richard sighed, his face falling. Your father was a big deal in the criminal world. A kingpin, really. But your mother, she never wanted that life. She was trapped in it. She tried to get out, tried to walk away, but it wasn't that easy. She was caught up in things she couldn't get out of, and when the heat came down, she made a deal. She gave her father up, and in exchange, she saved herself. And you were caught in the middle of it all. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My biological mother had sacrificed my father, and by extension me, to save herself. I wasn't just an innocent victim of circumstance. I was a part of something bigger, a piece of a game that had been played for years. The conversation with Richard left me shaken, but it also left me with more questions than answers. I had been told half-truths all my life. Now I was learning the full story, and it was worse than I could have ever imagined. My parents had been part of a world I couldn't even begin to understand, and I was left with the fallout. But one thing became clear. I wasn't just seeking answers anymore. I was seeking justice, and that meant finding the people who had destroyed my family, my real family, and making them pay. I started to realize that my search for answers wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about taking control of my future. Mia's betrayal, David's lies, and the sins of my adoptive family had all led me here. It was time to stop being the victim. It was time to turn the tables. I spent the next few days digging deeper, trying to track down the people who had been involved in my family's downfall. As I did, I found myself slipping further into the world of criminals and liars that I had always been kept away from. But it was the only world I knew now, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The game had changed, and I was going to make them all pay. The more I uncovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. But every truth I uncovered led to a deeper, darker hole. It felt like I was drowning in a world I never even knew existed, a world where people lied for survival, where betrayal was currency, and where family meant nothing. My adoptive mother's actions made sense now, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. She had turned her back on me before I was even born, and I was left with the wreckage of her decisions. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let it go. The anger I felt was burning deeper with each passing hour, and it was becoming harder to control. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to make her feel the weight of everything she had done. I called Richard again. After our last conversation, he had promised to give me more details, but he was always a little too hesitant, a little too careful with his words. I knew he was holding back, but there was only so much he could hide before I started putting the pieces together myself. When I finally reached him, his voice was lower, more serious than it had been before. "You sure you want to know all of this, Jake?" he asked. "This is a path you're not going to be able to come back from." I didn't hesitate. I have to know. I have to understand what my mother did. What they all did. Richard sighed. "All right, but know this. You're walking into something you're not prepared for." I didn't care. Nothing could prepare me for what I was about to uncover, but I was already too far in to stop now. I told Richard to meet me in person, and he agreed reluctantly. When we met, he didn't waste any time. "Your mother wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this, Jake. She was in deep. She had more to gain by betraying your real father than she did by staying loyal. She worked for the organization your father was part of, and the moment things started to fall apart, she cut a deal." I sat there, frozen. The woman who had raised me, the woman I had loved and trusted, had been a part of this criminal world. She had sold out my real father to save herself, and I was just a pawn in the game. She hadn't even cared enough to tell me the truth. She hadn't cared enough to protect me from the consequences of her own actions. Why didn't she just leave? I asked, my voice strained. Why betray him? Richard looked at me for a long moment before answering. It wasn't that simple. She didn't just give him up to save herself, Jake. She did it to protect you, too. Your father was being hunted, and when the pressure came down, your mother had to choose her survival or his. I felt the ground beneath me shift. Protect me? My whole life had been a lie, but this was worse. She had sold out the man who was my real father to protect herself, to protect me. That doesn't make sense. I whispered. Why not just leave the world behind? Why sell him out? Richard paused. She was in too deep, Jake. They weren't just a couple of street thugs. The organization your father worked for, they were serious. They had power, influence. You don't just walk away from something like that. You either go down with the ship or you play the game. Your mother played it, and she played it well. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything Richard was saying. The woman who had given me life, the woman who had claimed to love me, had made a choice to save herself, and in doing so, had doomed my real father to a life of misery and death. She had never even told me about the world she had come from, the dangerous, ugly world that had taken everything from me. I couldn't keep hearing about it secondhand. I had to face it. I had to go deeper, find out everything I could about the criminal organization that had been the catalyst for my biological family's destruction. The next few days were a whirlwind of research, late nights, and long hours combing through old records. I contacted old friends of my father, people who had been involved in his criminal past, and eventually I uncovered something that made my blood run cold. My biological mother had been the right hand of a major player in the criminal underworld, a figure known only as the broker. He was a shadowy figure who controlled a vast network of illegal operations across several states, and he was the one who had profited from the betrayal my mother had orchestrated. I needed to find him. I had to know what he knew, what my mother had done to protect him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that if I wanted to bring everything to light, I had to confront the source of the corruption. But there was a problem. The broker wasn't just some man I could find in a phone book. He was elusive, dangerous, and heavily guarded. If I wanted answers, I would have to go straight to the heart of his empire, and that meant getting into places I wasn't supposed to be. I spent the next few weeks shadowing the people who had worked with the broker, carefully making connections, gaining intel. I was walking a fine line, trying to stay unnoticed, trying to piece together a picture of who this man really was. But every time I thought I was getting closer to the truth, I found myself running into dead ends, people who would disappear before I could get them to talk. And then, one night, I got the call I'd been waiting for. The broker knows about you, Richard told me over the phone. He knows you're poking around, and he's not happy. If you want to get to him, you'll need to move fast. He's got eyes everywhere. But if you're serious about this, Jake, you've got to go in with everything you've got. It was the last warning I needed. The stakes were higher than ever. I wasn't just seeking justice anymore. I was after the truth. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it, no matter who I had to bring down along the way. I had spent weeks collecting pieces, following breadcrumbs, trying to get close to the truth without being noticed. But now I had no choice. Richard had warned me, but I didn't care anymore. The broker, the man behind everything, the man who had destroyed my family, the man who had silenced my biological parents with a price far too steep for anyone to pay. He was the key. If I wanted to know everything, I had to confront him. I wasn't naive. I knew I was walking into a world of danger. I had been trained as a lawyer, but this world, the criminal world, was something I couldn't possibly understand unless I fully immersed myself in it. I was already too deep, and I couldn't stop now. Every time I thought I might back out, I remembered the look in my biological mother's eyes, the way she had betrayed me without hesitation. And I remembered my adoptive mother's lies, her manipulation. So I made my move. I reached out to Claire, a woman I'd met a few weeks ago when I started looking for information on the broker. She had been working undercover, gathering intel on his operations, but she was getting tired. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep playing the role of the good cop, pretending to be loyal to a man who had blood on his hands. She had been in the game longer than me, but I could tell she was just as tired of the lies. "Jake, I told you before," she said when I called her. "This is a dangerous game you're playing. You don't know who you're dealing with. The broker isn't some small-time criminal. He controls everything from drugs to arms trafficking. You think you're the first person to try and bring him down." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "but I'm done hiding. I have to see this through. I need to know what happened to my parents." She didn't answer right away, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "You're not just going after your parents anymore, are you?" "No, I'm going after him," I said, the weight of my words sinking in. "I'm done being the victim. I'm going to end this." Claire was quiet for a moment. I could hear her sigh. "I'll help you," she said finally. But I can't guarantee you'll make it out alive. And I won't be able to stop you once you're in too deep. You're on your own after that. I knew it. I wasn't fooling myself into thinking I had a safety net. Once I went after the broker, it would be me against the world. But this was the only way to get the closure I needed. This was the only way to take back control. The next night, I met Claire at a bar in a rundown part of the city, where the lights flickered and the shadows seemed to swallow anyone who dared to venture too far from the streets. It felt like I was already walking into the lion's den. Claire was already waiting for me, her eyes scanning the room, always on alert. She didn't waste time getting to the point. "I've got a contact," she said, slipping a folder across the table toward me. "This is all the information we need to get to the broker. His locations, his people, his operations. We're not going to go in blind." I picked up the folder, my hands shaking slightly. I was ready for this, but I wasn't prepared for the depth of what I was about to face. The names, the details, all of it was too much. This wasn't just about my parents anymore. This was bigger than me. "Are you ready for this?" Claire asked, watching me closely. "Once we go in, there's no turning back. He's not just a businessman. He's a killer. And I'm not sure how much of what we have left will survive this." I nodded. I've been ready for a long time. We spent the next few days preparing, getting in touch with a few other people who had some information on the broker's whereabouts. But nothing could prepare me for what happened next. I had thought I was in control. I thought I had a plan. But plans, like everything else in my life, are never as solid as they seem. The moment I tried to move in on the broker's operations, I realized that I was being watched. I wasn't the only one trying to bring him down. I had been played. That night, as I left a meeting with one of my sources, I was ambushed. A black SUV skidded to a halt in front of me, and before I could even react, two men grabbed me, shoving me into the back seat. I struggled, tried to fight back, but they were too strong. My heart raced as I realized who had orchestrated this. It wasn't just the broker. It was her, my adoptive mother. I had been so focused on bringing the broker to justice, I had forgotten the one person who could destroy me without even lifting a finger. She was the mastermind behind this all, the person who had set everything in motion from the very beginning. I had been too blinded by my need for revenge to see the truth. I tried to speak, but they slammed me into the seat, holding me down with cold hands. My mind raced, but I couldn't think fast enough. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, struggling to break free. One of the men grinned, his face cold and detached. "You'll find out soon enough." The vehicle sped through the dark streets, weaving in and out of traffic as I struggled to get control of the situation. My thoughts were spinning out of control, and my only thought was what I got myself into. After what felt like an eternity, we pulled up to an old, abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city. The men shoved me out of the car and dragged me inside, where my adoptive mother was waiting. She stood there, her face cold, her arms crossed. She didn't seem surprised to see me. If anything, it was almost like she'd been expecting me. "You think you can just walk away from everything?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You think you can tear apart everything I've worked for and just leave me to clean up your mess? You have no idea what you're dealing with, Jake." "Why, Mom?" I shouted, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Why did you betray me? Why did you destroy my family?" Her eyes softened for a brief moment, but then the coldness returned. "You never understood, Jake. You were always just a tool. You were never meant to know the truth. You were never meant to be a part of this world." I looked at her in disbelief. "You used me. You used me for your own selfish gain. You used me to hide your own sins. And now I'm supposed to just let you get away with it?" "You'll never win, Jake," she said, stepping closer to me. "You've already lost. You can't fight what's already been set in motion." That's when I realized it. The broker wasn't the true enemy. My own mother was. I was going to make her pay. I had always imagined the moment of confrontation would feel like some grand victory, like I'd walk into the room, say my piece, and finally put an end to the mess my adoptive mother had created. But now, standing in front of her in the cold, dimly lit warehouse, nothing felt victorious. It just felt hollow, like I was staring at the ghost of the woman I once loved, the woman I thought was my savior, only to see her now as the source of my misery. She was standing in front of me, her arms crossed, her face stern, the same woman I had spent my entire life trying to please. But there was no love in her eyes anymore. There was only contempt and a strange, cold calculation that sent a chill down my spine. "You think you could just walk in here and destroy everything I've worked for?" she sneered. "You think you can just tear apart the life I've spent years building for you and think there won't be consequences?" I stood there, my chest tight with rage, but I wasn't going to let her get the satisfaction of seeing me break. I had been broken too many times by her to let her see how deep the cuts really were. "Don't act like you're the victim here, Mom." I spat, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You destroyed everything. You betrayed your own family. You ruined me, my real family. And for what? To protect yourself? To keep living this lie?" Her face twisted, like she didn't want to hear it, like she wanted to silence me. "You don't understand," she said sharply. "You never did. You don't know what it was like. I did what I had to do to survive. Your biological mother made the wrong choice, and she paid the price. You think she would have done anything different if she'd been in my shoes?" I felt the anger rise again. How dare she try to justify everything? How dare she act like she had some noble reason for betraying the people who had loved her? There was nothing noble about it. There was nothing right about it. She didn't care about anyone but herself. She never had. "I don't care about your excuses anymore," I said, stepping closer, my voice low and menacing. "I don't care about your survival. You destroyed my family. You destroyed me, and you're going to pay for that." Her eyes narrowed, but I could see the fear in them now. She had spent her life controlling me, controlling my every move, but now the tables were turned. She could see it. I was no longer afraid of her. "You think you can just take me down like that?" she said, her voice rising with panic. "You think you can expose me and everything will be fine? The truth is, you're in way over your head, Jake. The people I'm involved with, they won't let you get away with this." For the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. She had always thought she could manipulate me, always thought she had control, but now she was realizing she couldn't hide behind her lies anymore. I wasn't her puppet. I wasn't going to sit back and let her ruin everything for me. "I don't care about your criminal connections anymore, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to let you manipulate me. I'm not afraid of you or anyone else anymore. I'm taking control of my life, and you're not going to stop me." She looked at me, her expression hardening, and for a moment, I thought maybe she would snap, maybe she would finally show me just how far she was willing to go. But then something changed. The hardness in her eyes softened, and she took a step back, as if something inside her had finally broken. "I never wanted this for you," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't want you to be part of this world. I tried to protect you from it, try to keep you away from everything I did, everything I was. But you can't escape it, Jake. You can't just walk away from this life. You never could." I shook my head, my throat tight with emotion. "You lied to me. You destroyed everything. You betrayed me, Mom. You betrayed your own flesh and blood." She looked down, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of it all was finally too much to bear. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices. She had made mine for me. There was a long silence between us. And in that silence, I realized something that hit me harder than any of her manipulations ever could. I had no more room for her in my life. She wasn't my mother anymore. The woman standing in front of me was a stranger. The woman who had lied, betrayed, and manipulated wasn't the woman who had raised me. And that was the hardest pill to swallow. "I can't fix this," I said quietly. "You've ruined everything. You can't just sweep it all under the rug. You can't make it go away with a few words." Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry, Jake. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to find out like this, to know the truth. I never wanted to find out either," I said, my voice quiet now. "But now that I know, there's no going back. There's nothing you can say that will make it right." I turned away from her then. I didn't want to see her face anymore. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her justifications. It didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was that I had finally taken control of my life. I had broken free of her web of lies. I had freed myself from her grip. I started walking toward the door, but I heard her voice one last time. "Jake." I didn't stop. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, the finality of my words ringing in the air. I stepped out of the warehouse and into the night. I could feel the cool breeze against my skin, a stark contrast to the suffocating feeling I'd had in that room. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from the life I'd lived up until now, the life that had been built on lies. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had taken control of my story, and it was mine to write now. The truth had set me free, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The night was still, the kind of quiet that felt unnatural. After everything that had happened, after all the years I had spent living in the shadows of my family's lies, the truth was like a weight I couldn't shake off. I had confronted my adoptive mother. I had heard her excuses, felt the weight of her guilt, and yet nothing she said could change the fact that she had betrayed me. The road ahead wasn't clear. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let her have control anymore. I couldn't keep playing the role of the son who forgives, who lets things slide. Not anymore. But even as I walked away from her that night, the anger inside me didn't settle. It had only grown stronger. The truth was ugly, and the consequences of uncovering it were starting to feel heavier than I had anticipated. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do now. My real parents were gone. My adoptive mother was a stranger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. I spent the next few days alone. I didn't talk to anyone, not even Claire, the woman who had helped me uncover the secrets of my past, the woman who had been by my side through all of this. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go to her with my doubts. This wasn't her battle. It was mine. I tried to ignore the feeling of isolation that settled over me. I kept pushing myself forward, convinced that I was doing the right thing. I told myself that getting revenge on my adoptive mother was the end game. I needed to see her destroyed, just as she had destroyed me. But a part of me, the part that still remembered the woman who had raised me, wondered if there was another way. I didn't have the answer, but I wasn't ready to sit with that uncertainty. Not yet. The following week, I got a call from Claire. She had heard about my confrontation with my adoptive mother, and I could hear the concern in her voice when I picked up. "Jake, you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you, but I think it's important," she said, her tone serious. I braced myself. "What is it?" "There's been movement in the criminal organization your biological parents were connected to. They're not just going to let your mother walk away. They're planning something big, and they've already noticed you poking around." I could feel my heart rate quicken. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to be dragged back into that world. Not when I was finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. "Are you saying they're coming after me?" I asked, my voice tight with tension. "I don't know for sure," Claire replied, "but it's definitely possible, and you need to be careful. Your adoptive mother may have betrayed your biological parents, but she's still involved with some dangerous people. People who won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect their interests." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to wrap my mind around the situation. I thought I could walk away from all of this. I thought I could leave the past behind. But the past wasn't done with me. It never would be. "I don't want to go back into that world, Claire," I said, my voice low. "I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to move on. But every time I try, it feels like I'm being dragged back in." "I get it," she said, her voice softening. "But you can't ignore this. You've already opened the door, Jake. You're already in it. And you need to be prepared for what's coming next." I hung up the phone with a heavy sigh, the weight of everything I had learned pressing down on me. I had uncovered so many secrets, but the truth had only brought more questions. My family was a mess, one that I couldn't fix. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I thought about what Claire had said. I couldn't ignore the danger, no matter how much I wanted to. The organization wasn't going to forget about me. They were going to come after me, just as they had come after my biological parents. And I would be forced to confront them one way or another. I had thought I was done with it all, but the truth was that I was never going to be free. Not until I faced the consequences of my own past. I couldn't let go of the anger that burned inside me. I couldn't let go of the fact that I had been betrayed, that everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie. The only thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to let anyone control me anymore. Not my adoptive mother. Not the broker. Not anyone. But I wasn't going to walk into this blindly. I wasn't going to be a pawn in this game anymore. If they wanted me to play, then I was going to make sure I played on my own terms. The next day, I went to see Claire. We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, away from prying eyes. She was waiting for me when I arrived, her expression grim. "I think it's time we make our move," she said, her voice steady. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting down across from her. "I've been digging around, and I found something that could be our way in," she said, leaning forward. "The broker's operations are bigger than we thought, but there's a weak spot. If we can expose it, we can bring everything crashing down." I could feel the tension building. "What's the weak spot?" She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "How about the intel? We move tonight." I opened the folder and saw the names, the faces, everything I needed to bring down the people who had torn my family apart. But as I looked through the documents, one thing stood out to me. The broker's connections to my adoptive mother were even deeper than I had thought. She wasn't just an accomplice. She was involved in everything. "Let's do it," I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline rush through me. I didn't know how this would end, but for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt alive. I had made my decision. There was no going back now. The adrenaline from the plan burned through my veins as Claire and I sat in the car, watching the building across the street. It was a nondescript office building, tucked away in a forgotten part of the city. But inside, it housed one of the most dangerous people I had ever come across, the broker. His reach extended into every corner of the criminal world, and my adoptive mother had been his ally for years. I wasn't just doing this for the truth anymore. I wasn't doing this for justice. This wasn't about setting things right. It was about bringing down the empire they had built. It was about making them pay. Claire's eyes flickered to the building, scanning for any movement. "We're almost in," she said, her voice steady but filled with a tension that I could feel in my bones. "Are you sure you're ready for this? Once we go in, there's no turning back." I didn't hesitate. I've been ready for this my whole life. She nodded, her face hardened with resolve. She had been working with the law, trying to bring down the broker for years, but her cover had been blown, and now she was in the same boat as me, caught in a dangerous game. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to be the man who showed up to the party. I was going to take control. I was going to make sure I didn't walk away from this empty-handed. And I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. Not the broker, not Claire, and certainly not my adoptive mother. "We move in 20, Claire said, pulling her gun from under the seat. "You stay low, stick to the plan. You have your side of the building. How about mine?" I nodded. I had gone over the plan 100 times in my head, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The pieces were coming together too perfectly, too easily. I adjusted my jacket, feeling the weight of the gun tucked in my waistband. I had never used a weapon before, and I didn't plan on using it tonight. But I wasn't here to play by anyone's rules anymore. I was here to destroy everything. The plan was simple. We were going to expose the broker's operations. He had too many enemies, and if we could deliver the right intel, we could bring him down. But in the process, Claire and I are going to have to break into a secure building, bypass a ton of security, and not get caught in the crossfire of a criminal syndicate that had no intention of letting us walk out alive. I wasn't naive. I knew the risks. But when I looked at the pile of lies and deceit I had uncovered, when I thought about how my entire family had been destroyed because of people like the broker, it didn't feel like there was any other option. I had to make them pay. We approached the back entrance of the building, staying low and out of sight. The night was quiet, the only sounds coming from the soft hum of the city. As we neared the door, I felt the familiar rush of tension, that tightness in my chest that always came before something big. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't the man who lived in fear. I was a man who was done being lied to, done being the victim. I pressed the door open just a crack, checking the hallway beyond. Empty. Good. I motioned for Claire to follow, and we slipped inside. The building was dark, dimly lit by fluorescent lights that flickered overhead. We moved quickly, silently, as we made our way down the hall. The quiet was unnerving, but the sound of our footsteps was the only thing that kept me grounded. My thoughts were racing. Was I doing the right thing? Was this the right way to bring my family's legacy to an end? We reached the first door, and I felt the weight of everything pressed down on me. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about proving something to myself or to Mia or to anyone else. This was about control, taking back the life that had been stolen from me, making sure no one else could ever destroy it again. Claire and I exchanged a quick look before she turned the knob and pushed the door open. We slipped inside. It was a small office, filled with filing cabinets and scattered papers. Nothing too important. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt it. The shift in the air, the feeling that we weren't alone. I glanced at Claire, and she nodded. "This is it," she whispered. "We're close." We moved to the desk, quickly searching through the files and papers scattered across the surface. I knew what we were looking for. Any intel that would bring down the broker. Something that tied him to my adoptive mother's betrayal. Something that could expose everything and end the organization once and for all. My hand paused on a file, its contents barely visible under the dim light. I opened it carefully, my eyes scanning the documents inside. There it was, the document I had been searching for. Names, dates, locations, everything. And at the bottom of the last page, a name I recognized immediately. Sophia Monroe, my adoptive mother. Her signature was there, alongside a list of transactions that tied her directly to the broker. She hadn't just been a passive participant in this. She had been an active player. And the final transaction, signed just weeks before I uncovered the truth, was for something so twisted, so vile, that I could barely process it. I glanced up at Claire. She was still searching the other files, unaware of what I had found. But I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. My mother, my real mother, wasn't just a victim of betrayal. She was a pawn, and my adoptive mother had been pulling the strings the entire time. Before I could think, I heard a voice behind me. Looking for something? I froze. The voice was cold, sharp, familiar. I turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted in the dim light. The broker. The door slammed shut behind me as I stepped into the small office. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could barely hear the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. Claire froze beside me, her face pale as she saw the figure standing in the doorway. The broker, the man who had been the puppet master behind everything, the one who had built the empire that destroyed my family, the one who had lived in the shadows, untouchable, until now. He stood tall, wearing an expensive suit, his eyes hidden in the dim light. His presence was suffocating, like the walls of the room were closing in. His gaze flicked from Claire to me, a faint smile curling on his lips. "Jake Monroe," he said in a voice as cold as ice. I should have known it would be you. I could feel Claire tense beside me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. Everything that had happened, all the pain, the lies, the betrayal, it had brought me to this point. The point where I finally faced the person who had orchestrated everything, who had ruined my family, who had stolen my future. "You know me," I said, my voice steady, but there was a fire burning in my chest that wouldn't go out. "But you never really knew who I was, did you?" He chuckled softly, stepping further into the room. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're the son of a woman who couldn't make the right choice. A man who, unfortunately, was born into a world that wasn't made for him. But that doesn't matter now, does it? I'm not your pawn anymore," I said, taking a step toward him, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. "You don't get to control me. Not anymore." His smile faded slightly, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe even a hint of fear. "You don't understand, Jake. I control everything. Your mother, your father, the lies, the money, everything you've ever known, I made it happen. You're nothing but a ghost, walking through a world that I created. And you're so determined to destroy everything you've built, just to prove a point." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm here to take back control. I'm here to make you pay for everything." There was a brief moment of silence as the broker's smile returned, this time colder, more calculating. "You think you're in control, Jake? You think you could just walk in here and take everything back? You're a fool. You always were. And now, you're going to regret ever coming after me." Before I could react, he snapped his fingers. Two men stepped out from the shadows, guns drawn, their eyes cold and lifeless. I should have expected this. The broker wasn't going to let me walk out alive without a fight. I turned to Claire. "Get out of here. Now." She hesitated for a second, then nodded and sprinted for the door. She was the only ally I had left, and I wasn't going to let her get caught in the crossfire. As she ran, the men with the guns turned toward her, but I was quicker. I grabbed a chair from behind me, hurling it toward one of the men. It hit him square in the chest, knocking him back. The other guy fired, but I ducked, the bullet ricocheting off the wall beside me. This wasn't just about confronting the broker anymore. This was a battle for my life. The two men advanced, but I had already planned my move. I had a gun, but I wasn't about to use it unless I had to. Instead, I moved toward the desk, grabbing the edge for leverage as I sprinted across the room. The first man tried to tackle me, but I threw him off with a shoulder roll, sending him crashing into a bookshelf. I grabbed a lamp from the desk, swinging it hard into his head, knocking him unconscious. The second man wasn't as easy. He came at me with more force, swinging his gun like a blunt instrument. We clashed, both of us scrambling for control of the weapon. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't going to lose. I wasn't going to let him win. I finally grabbed his wrist, twisting it violently, forcing him to drop the gun. In one fluid motion, I grabbed it and pushed him back, pointing it directly at his chest. "You're going to walk out of here," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline, "and you're going to forget you ever saw me. Understand?" He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I shoved him toward the door, and he stumbled out, not looking back. Now it was just me and the broker. He didn't seem fazed by the chaos. If anything, his calm demeanor only made him more menacing. "You're wasting your time, Jake," he said, his voice as cold as before. "You think you've won? You think I'm afraid of you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't afford to waste words. This wasn't about talk anymore. This was about action. I took a step toward him, my gun still pointed. The room was silent except for the echo of our breathing. This was it, the final confrontation. "I'm done running," I said, the words dripping with finality. "I'm done being the victim. You're going to pay for everything. For what you did to my family. For what you did to me." The broker stepped back, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought he might actually back down. But then his expression shifted. He seemed to accept the inevitable. "You really think you've got the upper hand?" he asked, his voice low, almost amused. "You have no idea what you're up against. No idea what this is going to cost you." "I'm already paying the price," I said, the cold weight of the words sinking in. "I lost everything because of you. But now, I'm taking it all back. One way or another." I fired the shot. The moment I pulled the trigger, everything seemed to stop. The sound of the gunshot rang in my ears like a bell tolling the end of something. I watched as the broker staggered back, his face a mask of shock, his hand reaching for the wound that was already seeping blood. He looked at me, disbelief written in his eyes. It was like he couldn't fathom the idea that someone like me could do this, could take this power from him, could take his life into his own hands. I wasn't sure how I felt in that moment. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. The weight of everything I'd uncovered, the years of betrayal, the lies, the pain, I could feel it all crashing down on me. The anger, the need for revenge, the righteous indignation I had carried with me for so long, it had all culminated in this. The broker was going to die, but something inside me wondered if that was enough. If ending his life would really erase the damage he had done to mine. "You're nothing," the broker spat, his voice dripping with venom, even as he struggled to breathe. "You think this changes anything? You think you can bring me down? I'm untouchable, kid. You're just a pawn. You always were." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The man who had torn my family apart, who had orchestrated all of this, was lying on the floor, his life slipping away. I wasn't going to feel bad for him. I wasn't going to feel guilty. But even as I looked at him, the finality of it all hit me harder than I expected. I stepped back, breathing heavily, my gun still raised. I should have been feeling something. Anything. But I was numb. The relief I thought I'd feel didn't come. There was no rush of victory. No closure. Just a feeling of being stuck in a world I had never wanted to be a part of. I was free, but I wasn't sure what I was free from anymore. I had lost so much of myself in this pursuit of vengeance that I didn't even recognize the man I had become. Before I could even process the weight of the moment, I heard footsteps behind me. "Jake." I spun around, my heart racing. Claire stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen everything. She had seen me pull the trigger, seen the blood, seen the broker lying there, helpless and dying. and I could see in her eyes that she didn't understand. She didn't know what to think of me anymore. I felt the walls close in on me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain this moment to her, to anyone. This wasn't what I had planned. This wasn't the victory I thought I would feel. I had to do it, I said, my voice hoarse, as if trying to convince myself. He would have killed us both. He had too much power. I couldn't let him walk away. Claire didn't move. She didn't speak for a moment, just stared at me, her gaze fixed on my face. I don't know if I can look at you the same way again, Jake, she said quietly, her voice strained. This isn't you. This isn't who I thought you were. I didn't argue with her. I didn't try to defend myself. She was right. I had become someone else, someone I didn't even recognize. But there was nothing I could do now. The moment had passed, and there was no going back. You need to leave, Claire, I said softly. This is over. You're not safe here anymore. Neither of us are. She shook her head slowly, tears welling in her eyes. You think you're just going to walk away from this? After everything we've been through? After everything you've done? I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I had done. I didn't know what I was anymore. I had gone too far. I had become someone I could never come back from. I didn't need to hear anything else from Claire. I didn't need her to tell me how wrong I was. I already knew. I had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The life I had known, the person I was before this whole thing started, it was gone. And I wasn't sure I wanted to try to bring it back. I turned away from her, my hand shaking as I dropped the gun to the ground. The weight of it all was too much. I had lost my family, lost my peace, lost my humanity. And in the end, I wasn't sure it had been worth it. I walked out of the room, leaving the broker's body behind, a cold reminder of the world I had stepped into. The walls of the warehouse seemed to close in on me as I moved down the hall, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. Outside, the world was still the same. The city hummed with life, but I felt like I was already a ghost. I didn't belong here anymore. I didn't belong anywhere. I had lost myself in the pursuit of justice, in the pursuit of vengeance. And now, I was left with nothing but the aftermath. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing. I was free from the shackles of my past, even if it meant becoming someone I could never forgive. I sat on the steps of the building for hours, watching the city go by. My phone buzzed a few times, but I didn't look at it. I didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. I had taken everything I could from the people who had hurt me. But in the end, I realized I had lost just as much as they had. Mia was gone. David was gone. My mother, both of them, were gone in one way or another. And now, I was left with the wreckage. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't unmake the choices I had made. All I could do was move forward. So I stood up and walked into the night, the city lights casting long shadows behind me. Maybe there was something better waiting for me, maybe not. But at least for the first time, I was free. I sat there, staring out the window, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. The weight of everything I'd uncovered, everything I'd done, felt heavier than I had expected. The broker was gone. My adoptive mother had been exposed. I had taken everything from them, every secret they tried to bury, every lie they told me. But even as I stood victorious in that moment, there was a hollow ache deep inside me. It didn't feel like a win. It didn't feel like anything at all. Claire's presence beside me brought me back to reality, but the guilt still lingered. I thought I'd feel this rush of relief, this sense of closure, when I took down the broker, when I brought my adoptive mother to the surface. But now that the storm had passed, I realized something. This wasn't about justice. It was about me. And in the end, revenge never gives you back what it takes. You're quiet, Claire said softly. I know you've been through hell, Jake, but you've made it out. You did what you set out to do. I looked at her, the truth finally sinking in. She was right in a way, but all I felt now was exhaustion. Is this it? Is this all I have left? A pile of wreckage and a feeling of nothing? No, she said, her voice gentle but firm. This isn't it. You faced your demons, Jake, but now you have to face yourself. I shook my head, unable to find the words. I thought the truth would set me free, but it didn't. It just left me with more questions, more chaos, more regret. It didn't fix anything. She didn't say anything at first. She just watched me, like she was waiting for me to come to the realization myself. Jake, she said finally, breaking the silence. It's not about fixing everything. It's about understanding what you can't change and learning to live with what you've lost. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger, something other than the desire for vengeance. I felt the sting of loss, yes, but I also felt relief. I realized then that I had been holding on to the idea of revenge like it was my only salvation. I thought it would give me peace. I thought it would fix everything that had been broken in me. But revenge only gave me more wounds. It gave me a momentary release, but it never healed the damage. It never made me whole again. I've spent so long wanting to tear them down, I muttered, barely above a whisper. I wanted to destroy everything they took from me. But now that I've done it, I don't feel better. I feel lost. Claire's eyes softened. You've been carrying this weight for so long, Jake. But the truth is, revenge doesn't give you back what you lost. It only drags you deeper into the same darkness. It's time to choose something else. I stood up from the couch, pacing. But how? How do I let go? How do I move past this when all I've ever known is pain, betrayal, lies? Her words were quiet, but they cut through the noise in my head. You start by forgiving yourself. You start by accepting that you can't fix everything. And you start by making the choice to move forward without letting your past define you anymore. I stopped pacing and turned to face her, my chest tightening. I don't know how to do that. You will, Claire said. But you have to start somewhere. I took a deep breath. Her words echoed in my mind, and for the first time I thought I understood. I had spent so long blaming everyone else for my pain, my adoptive mother, the broker Mia, David, but in the end, I was the one who had carried that pain. I was the one who had let it define me. I had to let go. I had to choose peace. But just as I began to process her words, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text message from an unknown number. I stared at it, my heart skipping a beat. The message was short. You're not done yet, Jake. You think you've won? This isn't over. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart raced, adrenaline shooting through my veins. The world I thought I had left behind was back, pulling me back into the chaos. The familiar feeling of fear and tension crept back into my chest. I grabbed the phone, my fingers shaking as I typed back. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Someone you haven't faced yet. My mind raced, and for a moment, I forgot everything Claire had just told me. I was back in that world, back to the chaos, back to the fight. For a second, I thought about following the thread, chasing down the person behind the message, trying to finish what I started. But then, I remembered what Claire had said. I had to choose. I had already made so many choices, fought so many battles. And for once, I didn't want to keep fighting. I didn't want to keep running after revenge. I dropped the phone back on the table, my pulse still pounding in my ears. But I stayed calm. This was the moment where I had to choose. The text was a reminder that the chaos would never stop, but I didn't have to feed into it. I didn't have to keep going down that path. I turned to Claire, who was watching me carefully. I can't keep doing this. I've already lost too much of myself. She nodded, then stopped fighting it. I sat back down on the couch, my head spinning, but for the first time, I felt clarity. The message had thrown me off balance, but it also reminded me of the choice I had been avoiding. I had to let go of the fight. The chaos would always be there, waiting for me, but I didn't have to keep chasing after it. For once, I chose peace. I stood up, took a deep breath, and said, I'm done with all of this. I'm done letting it define me. It ends here. As I sit back and reflect on everything that's happened, betrayal, lies, revenge, and the chaos that followed, it's hard not to feel like life really is a twisted game sometimes. But the thing is, it's not just about winning or getting even. It's about knowing when to let go and when to walk away. The truth has a way of showing up when you least expect it, and when it does, it can change everything. But here's the kicker. You can't just hold on to it forever. At some point, you have to decide to move forward, to leave the drama behind and start fresh. If you've enjoyed this ride, this story full of twists, turns, and crazy moments, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a good drama, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for sticking around until the end. It's been one hell of a journey, but we're just getting started.